This video today is going to focus on control of blood pressure, body hydration, and urine concentration, and how all three of those things can actually be pretty tied to each other when you look at it in a hormonal way. There's a lot of hormonal systems involved here, and we're going to take a peek at how they work and what their effects on the kidney and nephron might be. So the two goals that we have are to explain the hormonal control of blood pressure and urine concentration via the RAA system, and I will define that in a second, and also to explain the role of antidiuretic hormone, which is also known as ADH or vasopressin, in body hydration, blood pressure regulation, and urine concentration. So they're two separate systems, but they're both working concurrently to help control primarily blood pressure, but body hydration, and as a side effect, the urine concentration will change while we're using these. So let's take a brief look at this handout here. This is a verbal representation of the way that the RAA system, the renin, angiotensin, and aldosterone system, works. And this system is primarily a blood pressure regulation system. You're going to have some cells in the nephron that are going to be able to pick up on changes in blood pressure or blood sodium levels, and that's going to stimulate a whole cascade of effects that will basically convert enzymes from inactive to active forms, and then in the end cause hopefully the blood pressure to rise. This handout you can use as we look at the next picture. I think it's nice to have some images to kind of correlate to what you're reading here. So I'm going to switch to the picture, but really everything that is on this handout you'll see on the next slide. So let's take a look here. We're going to start in the lower left corner here by the kidney. And as I said before, your kidney has a role in monitoring your blood pressure. And there are two ways that the kidney can tell if the blood pressure has changed or blood volume has changed, because if your blood volume drops, your blood pressure drops, and the same is true for if it increases. Now, if you have low plasma sodium, that will follow through. You will see that in your filtrate. Your filtrate sodium levels will be low. And that drop in sodium will be picked up by a group of cells in the distal convoluted tubule. Okay, now the distal convoluted tubule is kind of strange. It actually kind of wraps itself back around and contacts the Bowman's capsule, or not the Bowman's capsule, but the glomerular capsule area, I should say. And what it does is it touches the afferent arteriole and the efferent arteriole right here. And at that point of contact, you find a special group of cells called the macula densa within the distal convoluted tubule. Macula densa. And these cells have the ability to detect that drop in sodium or lower blood pressure. When they pick up on that change, it will cause the secretion of the hormone renin, which comes from the group of cells right next to them. These are the juxtaglomerular cells right here. They're in the afferent arteriole. These cells will secrete renin, which will cause the following effects. So you can see renin here being secreted as the stimulus of low blood plasma or low blood pressure has been applied. What renin will do is it will act on an enzyme called angiotensinogen, which comes from the liver. This enzyme is inactive, and we know it's inactive because it has this ending here, ogen. Ogen means generating. So what this is literally saying is this will generate angiotensin. So anytime you see a hormone or anything that ends in ogen, like fibrinogen, basically it's an inactive form. So this enzyme that is produced by the liver gets acted upon by renin when the blood pressure is low and becomes angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1, then, as the blood carries the angiotensin 1 through to the liver, will be converted to angiotensin 2 by an enzyme called angiotensin converting enzyme. Excuse me, the lungs, not the liver. I think I said lungs here. It actually gets carried through the lungs and acted upon by angiotensin converting enzyme, or ACE, and converted to angiotensin 2. You may have heard of medications known as ACE inhibitors, and that is the ACE it's referring to. Sometimes when this system gets out of whack, it actually causes an increase in blood pressure, and because of that increase, you are at risk for cardiovascular issues. So doctors will prescribe an ACE inhibitor to stop this process from happening, because what will happen upon creation of angiotensin II is angiotensin II will cause a few different things to occur, and you can see on the handout there's 3 listed. First off, the renal arterioles will constrict. They'll vasoconstrict, so all the little arterioles that are kind of going through the kidneys will vasoconstrict, and that increases blood pressure. You're decreasing the area that the fluid is flowing through, so the blood pressure will go up. It will increase sodium reabsorption from the proximal tubule, as well as water, and it will cause the secretion of something called aldosterone. And aldosterone is another hormone that will cause an increase in sodium reabsorption in the nephron. Now, when you reabsorb sodium, one, you're bringing your sodium levels back up in the plasma, but water has a tendency to follow these salts. So the more sodium you reabsorb, the more water you're going to be reabsorbing, and therefore the blood pressure will go up because the blood volume will go up. So you will also see some sodium reabsorption happening in the distal convoluted tubule under the effects of aldosterone as well. So aldosterone is a big hormone, big important one that it's basically just going to cause that sodium reabsorption to occur, and that is in response to angiotensin II being created. So it seems like a complex little system, but it's really not so bad. You know, you have your renin acting on angiotensinogen. That becomes angiotensin I. In the lungs, angiotensin I gets converted to angiotensin II, and then angiotensin II causes secretion of aldosterone, and then also it has some vasoconstrictive properties. So the RAA system is very much just a blood pressure regulator, and you can see how the urine concentration will be changing because we're going to be changing how much we're reabsorbing from the filtrate. So keep that in mind. You know, how would this affect the osmolarity of the solution, the specific gravity of a solution, if you had this system, you know, in full effect as it was working. The other hormonal system that's important to understand is that of antidiuretic hormone, also known as ADH or vasopressin. Antidiuretic hormone, if you literally break the word down, it means the non-urinating hormone. A diuretic is something that increases urine output. So antidiuretic is something that will decrease urine output. And so when you secrete antidiuretic hormone, you will decrease the urine output. Now, ADH comes from the posterior pituitary gland. You can see the image down here. But it's actually created in the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus has the ability, let me go back, to recognize when your blood volume is low, you're dehydrated. And so it will recognize that. It will allow for the secretion from the posterior pituitary of ADH. So when you can kind of see here, when your body is low, you have decreased body hydration, so you're dehydrated, you'll have an increase in antidiuretic hormone. When antidiuretic hormone is released, it will decrease your urine volume, because what's happening here is we're saying, okay, I don't want all of that water to be released or excreted into the urine. I want to keep it in the body. So when you have an increase in ADH, you're going to have an increase of water reabsorption and a decrease in the urine that you're creating. If your urine volume is going to drop, but the solute concentration stays pretty much the same, you're going to have an increased urine concentration. That's going to lead to an increased specific gravity and an increased osmolarity. So thinking of what a urine sample of someone who might have an ADH overproduction would be, you'd have very, very concentrated urine. So something to think about. And then on the flip side, as you can see, if you're very hydrated, you have an increase in body hydration, that will cause a decrease in antidiuretic hormone secretion. If you don't have antidiuretic hormone secretion, then you're not going to reabsorb as much water. And when you don't reabsorb as much water, you have an increased urine volume and a decreased urine concentration. Now, ADH acts primarily on the collecting duct. And I have mentioned in the other video that what actually happens is you have little pores that get formed, they get built under the actions of vasopressin, of ADH. So when you have it there, more pores get placed in the wall here of the collecting duct, as you can see, and because we have more of those aquaporins, they're called, we are able to reabsorb more water. So here, in this case, when you are not having ADH action, you have a large volume of dilute urine. Everything's kind of flowing through, you don't have a lot of water reabsorption happening. Here, in the presence of ADH, you're reabsorbing a lot of water. That means your solutes are going to be more concentrated in the little water that we're leaving behind, giving you a small volume of concentrated urine. So hopefully we've met our two goals here. We wanted to explain hormonal control of blood pressure and urine concentration via the RAA system, as well as talk about antidiuretic hormone and its role in body hydration, blood pressure regulation, and urine concentration. So in this case, if you have any questions, you're free to ask me in class or shoot me an email. Please make sure you take this short quiz on Canvas after you finish watching this. Thank you.